We are meant to work from a place of rest. We're not meant to rest from a place of work. And that's really countercultural. You're not going to find many people holding that true for yourself, except for yourself and maybe your spouse or your roommate. You're not going to have people who are fighting to make sure that your body and heart and mind are restored. And so whatever that looks like, whatever that amount of time, how do we work from a place of rest?
Welcome to Wealth Beyond Riches. In today's episode, we're going to talk with Jackie Glass. I've known Jackie for over 20 years. She's an incredible coach for executives. She's a keynote speaker as well as preacher. So her keynote speaking also is on Sundays. And she's a mother of 4 and a Working Genius facilitator. I've always been interested in the Working Genius and I've never done it. So I took the assessment, and if you listen to not this episode, but the next one in a couple of weeks, she is going to unpack my Working Genius assessment live on the air because she has 4 kids, I have 4 kids, and we don't have a lot of time. So we recorded it and talked through it. So you'll get to unpack Working Genius through my lens a little bit as a way to hear about it. In the first half of this conversation, we're going to talk about her coaching and the leaders that she is working with, and how leaders you might think you're lonely at the top. They say it's lonely at the top. As a leader, you're actually loneliest during a transition. So maybe you're selling a business and you're experiencing a lot of loneliness around that transition. Maybe you're retiring and you're experiencing some loneliness during that transition, or you're preparing for that time. You're not going to want to miss what she has to say, how you can prepare, perform, and prevail. So this was an awesome conversation. We just finished recording it, and you're really going to enjoy it. This is going to be great. Jackie, I'm so excited that we get to talk today. I've been looking forward to this conversation. I've also been really scared of this conversation because we are going to talk one of your specialties, Working Genius, later on. But you and I have known each other for a long time.
A long time.
Yeah. I think, as I think back, so we met at the receiving line of my wedding because you were the plus one that we never invited.
That you knew you needed. That you knew you needed.
We knew we needed. And it was one of those things, we're 21 years old. You throw out the invite to your college friends, but at that point, it's not really a plus one kind of thing because you've got quite a few friends. And then good old John, your now husband, wrote in, I've got a plus one. And we were like, what the heck, dude? This is not a plus one thing. And then we met you. And now we've been friends for, oh my goodness, 20 years now.
Yeah, 20 years, 20
Yeah.
years. And I couldn't imagine not having been at your wedding. That's what's great about all of this, is that John knew something that we didn't even know how much we needed. But at this point, I'm like, I can't imagine if I wasn't there. I'm glad I am forever the plus one that was never meant to be there, but ended up there.
Yes, I love it. I love it. Jackie, I'm so excited. First of all, first female guest on the podcast. So I am
thank you.
so pumped about that. We definitely need more, that's for sure. So I'll get some names out of you by the end of this for future guests. And one of the things that, first of all, your Instagram bio, I love it. Wellness keynote speaker, Working Genius teacher, and weekend preacher. Was the rhyming on purpose?
I mean, a communicator doesn't even need to tell you if they're a communicator. They just rhyme, or they use the same letters for alliteration, right? We just give it away in our bio. So yes, I did mean to rhyme it as I share the different vocational spheres of my life.
Yes, I love it. I love it. So you've got a lot of things going on. For Jackie Glass, what does work look like right now?
Yeah, so right now I'm an executive wellness coach and speaker. And so what that means is I really love working with leaders and people all around this intersection of wellness and work. And so wellness can be this topic, often like finances, where a lot of people feel they know they need to take care of it, but there's a level of shame, a level of trying, a level of doubt, a level of barriers. And so what I really enjoy doing is coming alongside somebody, being their person in their corner when their maybe heart, mind, body, soul, family, vocation, there's a lack of energy in one or maybe all of the spheres, and figuring out what is this intersection of wellness and work? How does somebody experience movement? And you don't become an executive wellness coach without experiencing being unwell yourself. And so part of that has been through my own journey of saying, if I look back over my life, where are there key moments at which I needed to have heard a different thing from a speaker, or
Mm.
I needed a coach who could really hold these different parts of me as I was leading, as I was growing a business, as I was employed. And so that has led me to right now being a specific coach and speaker for people holding all those different spheres for them.
Yeah, and I would say your main target market, for lack of a better term, is probably female executives,
Correct.
both in the private sector and then also in like the ministry church sector as well. Am I leaving anything out there?
Yeah, absolutely. I thank
I
you
am
for
leaving stuff out. That was
no, you're
great. That
not.
was
No,
so
I was
honest.
gonna
Yeah,
say,
absolutely. You're definitely leaving some stuff out, Tip. That's why I'm asking you.
there is a unique part to females in leadership. And
Hmm.
so my eyes have definitely been specifically on females. I do coach males as well. And obviously, when I speak to both,
Hmm.
because there's a humanness underneath females and males that
Hmm.
are very tried and true and similar in a lot of ways. But specifically with the coaching, I really enjoy coaching females. I think there is a uniqueness that often they're not as supported or perhaps in positions that receive as much coaching or care. And part of what I've learned as a female is not all of us, but many of us have a lot of vocational shifts that really generosity in our life, especially as a wife and a mom, is constantly shifting. And so, needing to that, going through a lot of transitions and change depending on ages and stages of kids, but also what is purpose and energy and joy and fulfillment look like? And that is very unique. And so, I discovered that even when it comes to females in leadership, if they're not often at the top part, perhaps they're overlooked within their ministry, within their nonprofit, within their business. And so, what I realized was when I stepped off being full employed, I said, you know what? I want to have space and margin for people who are still holding it all together,
Hmm.
but allowing to have enough energy and margin to come alongside as they continue to shift within it. And so, that's been fun to see that. I think for all of us, what we feel energized or passionate about is actually a need when it comes to where we step in vocationally. And believing that and seeing that has been really fulfilling, specifically when it comes to women being in leadership.
Hmm. That's so cool. What, as you're helping somebody, say, through one of those vocation transitions, what does that look like? What kind of questions are they asking? What kind of things are you talking about with them that helps them prepare for that transition?
Yeah, it's so good. I have a degree in therapy. And so what's interesting with therapy is there's even, diagnosis for change. But
Mm.
often so many of us change and we don't realize all the ways at which it affects us, or how transitions really are this integration of so many pieces of us that we feel like we can prepare for. But then we feel hijacked and surprised by certain things that don't go well or take this exorbitant amount of energy from us as we begin to change. And so often when I'm coaching people, it is within a realm of some type of vocational shift, or perhaps there's a pit plan, or there's a succession plan and they are changing not only roles within their company, but they're also they're retiring or they're shifting to a fully different career, or again, this next stage of life. And so, one of the really key questions to ask yourself is, what am I taking with me and what am I leaving behind? But also within that, to remember there are these things that we can prepare for, but then there are these really surprising things that will just hijack us. As a mom, I experience that all the time. We're in the season of going back to school, and I always think it's going to be wonderful. And then some of my children don't enjoy school drop off, and I'm surprised every year. And sometimes I just think to myself, there are sometimes these disproportionate things that take an exorbitant more amount of energy. And so often when somebody is transitioning, what I will help them do is really this three-part plan. This comes from this book from Carrie Lorenz called The Span of Control. She was the first female fighter pilot of the Navy, and she talks about what this looks like when you're trying to really complete something and move to something new. And so she has this three-part plan, and she talks about how you prepare, you perform, and you prevail. Again, all the alliterations. This is how we all remember everything, right?
Yes.
So we prepare we perform and we prevail. And so when I'm coaching somebody who is moving through some type of change, again, many of us who are listening to this, you've experienced it as well. There are some things we know and we can prepare for, and there's other things that really surprise us. And so, really, that first part of prepare. And so, what I do is I walk through people really with this wellness assessment, heart, mind, body, soul, and what that looks like. I will say one of the things that often surprise people most about what they need to prepare for is that we often think that the loneliest we feel is when we're leading, that we're at the top. But what the research shows is you actually feel loneliest in the change.
Hmm.
You feel loneliness in the transition. And so even when we think about preparing, it's who's coming with you? Who are those coworkers that you're no longer seeing? What does it look like to be retired at home? What does that look like of who's in the house now and who's out of the house? And who do you normally have proximity with that you no longer with? And so some of these areas that we can prepare for, but also these areas that just tend to surprise us, that if we are not careful, make us doubt or wonder or think, did I really hear right? Should I have left? Should I have made that decision? And so then we just walk people through it. And then the perform is the actual time that is spent. So what does that look like? What does that look like on your last day? What does that look like with the going away party? What does that look like of what your next job is going to look like? What does Monday look like in this new role with your new boss? And so what does that actual moment look like of when you perform, you actually have made the shift? And then the last part is this prevailing. So now what? So now this reality is really here. What am I presently experiencing? What are these things that I've prepared for and they've gone better than I can imagine? And what are these things that, oh my goodness, what did I just do with my life? And how do I have them, fire the person who just took my job and have me go back? And so again, change takes about 6 months. And so really normalizing that process in any type of shift. Again, if you're shifting careers, if you're retiring into a new season of life, if you are moving jobs within your own profession, if you're becoming an entrepreneur, all of these ways that let us resettle in, reroute a little bit. But again, who are you taking with you? What are you taking with you? What are the rhythms that look the same? And what are the rhythms that now look different? All are along that line of really what a change and transition looks like.
Wow. We could probably stop there because that was just, I have so many things I'm thinking about right now. I love the what are you taking with you and what are you leaving behind? You hit straight to the heart when you're talking about going back to school. We're recording this at the end of August and we're going through that same thing as a family. You got a high school or a junior high or a couple in elementary school. And even just, I found like acknowledging
Yeah.
this is a transition.
Yeah.
It's hard to do in the moment, but acknowledging, hey, stuff is changing and
Yeah.
that's okay.
Yeah.
And that means there's going to be an adjustment period and that
Yes.
will take time. And evidently it's going to take us until February
Right.
to get through that.
Before it's time to go to the next school year.
Exactly. But just so great to acknowledge I'm going through a transition. I think one thing too that a lot of people miss that you brought up is say you're selling a business or maybe you're selling part of your business and you're moving into a new role or you're bringing in a CEO above you
Yep.
to run the
Yep.
business because you're the founder and you're the entrepreneur, but you need someone else to really run it and keep everything running on time. That is a transition. Even though the company title on your LinkedIn profile stays the same, you're in a brand new role, a brand new season, and that requires some of your gifts that you have to come along with you and some of those responsibilities you did before just because you were the founder, you were the entrepreneur, you need to leave those behind. So I'm speaking to myself at this point.
No, it's so true because I think that many of us we love the roles that we're in and we have worked really hard to get to our roles and there's been great favor on us and we love it and we also know when it's time to shift. And when the identity piece comes, like you said, if your title changes on LinkedIn or it doesn't, but there's just a piece of it of, will I still be seen for being good at these things? And it's as if there's this tool belt that we all wear around our waist And as we go about life, we continue to gather these skills. We continue to develop. We know we can do all these different things. Maybe it's all these different titles. But what happens is we want to keep holding them all.
Mm.
As we want to keep grasping to everything. At least I know I do, to be like, did you know I also did this?
Yeah.
But did you know I could do this? And
Well, you just
instead,
get a bigger tool belt. That's all you
yes,
gotta do.
yes, right? And I think in those moments of transition, what we can say is, hey, just put your tools away. They're not going anywhere.
Mm,
They're just not needed now, you know? So don't worry if somebody asked you to do this, right, you got it. You could engage in it. But I think there's a settling within
mm,
to then say, none of this is taken away from you. But then some of the identity piece can say, it's also okay to move on and to trust that the energy was shifting, that the
mm.
role was shifting, that you were meant to be in a new place with new people, but that nothing that you have done or experienced has taken away. You just don't have to keep grasping to it all at the same time.
Yeah. That's really good. Right now, you've got me thinking about my tool bucket and this roll of fish tape that's in it, and
Uh-huh.
fish tape is meant to pull wires through to from one floor to the other or through conduit,
Yep.
and I used it a couple times to, reset where my thermostat was on the wall, and you know what? I'm actually not very good at that stuff, and it just sits there, but I keep it in the bucket because I'm like, "I
You
might
got
need
it.
it. I
You
might
got
need
it.
it one day." But
Nobody can take that away from you.
and also, I've also handed it to somebody else.
That's right.
Is
That's right.
there a piece where you could take those tools and go, "You know what? I'm handing these to the next person to
Yes.
use?"
Yes. And isn't that so much really what leadership is about and what generosity is about? I mean, you do such brilliant work, Tim, in the field of wealth and generosity. And I also know this about you is your wide view of what generosity really is. I mean, generosity is relationships and different levels of currency. And part of that is
Mm,
opportunity. And part of that is inviting others to experience what you've also experienced, and it's the baton passing, and absolutely, like, your ability to then let somebody else use it, your ability to then allow somebody else to take an opportunity or take a role is really just an overwhelming piece of gratitude for us. It almost gives back to us if we can step back a bit and
yeah,
realize that multiplication factor, and not only relieves us and really moves us to the next season of life, but it also does something within us of the generosity towards other people to let them use what's in your tool bucket, right?
yeah.
That's what you have done for many of us and
Mm,
continue to do with so many of the people that you work with. You model that incredibly well.
hmm. Oh, thank you. If you're watching, you could see the uncomfortableness in my body language
Good,
as
I'll
you were
keep saying
saying
it. This is
those
great.
really nice things. If you're listening, I got pretty embarrassed, but Jackie, so thankful for you. You're such an encourager and an encourager with words, obviously, why you're a great communicator. Yeah, I've been thinking more about that lately of the generosity of spirit of uh, being able to take one of your tools, hand it to somebody else, see them struggle at first, see them start to learn how to be an expert craftsman with that tool, and all of a sudden the see the satisfaction, the fulfillment they're getting from exercising their gifts and growing in their gifts.
Yeah.
That takes a long view perspective when it's, man, I just want this thing done by tomorrow. And that's such a great reminder for really anybody listening
Mm.
to this.
That's great. That's great. Yeah. And I think that we want to stay in the same place, right?
Hmm.
That they say that, what we're all shooting for is balance, but
Mm,
balance is actually stagnant,
hmm.
where movement is where you find the energy. And
Yeah.
so never be afraid to shift, never be afraid to change, never be afraid to hand off something, because in that you continue to move and shift and change. And so even if life has looked the same for 20 years and you're at the same role or job, there's always pieces of movement that we can pursue over what we have kind of bought into, that balance is what we're looking for. But balance is really stagnant. And I don't think as humans we're meant to be chasing balance. I think
Hmm.
we're meant to be keeping up with movement. And with that also is even handing off those opportunities. Like you said, even within us, there continues to be that little gear of what's next for us because I'm handing off what I have done.
I really like that. Balance is stagnant, and movement is actually what we're looking for. there's the book called The One Thing, and the magic happens at the extremes.
Yeah.
It balances that dotted line down the middle. But really, when you lean into your family, when you lean into work, and obviously you can only lean into work for so long before you need to bounce back to your family.
Mhm,
But
mhm.
that regular rhythm of kind of shifting back and forth, not looking for the dotted line down the middle, I think is so powerful.
Yeah, so good.
Um, as you think about movement and people moving towards that rather than balance, what would you say as you're coaching people on wholeness and wellness? Where does rest factor in right now? As you're coaching people, how are you helping them address the rest that they need in order to be able to have those periods of movement?
Yeah, it reminds me of when we were in kids. You'll get this because you used to be a teacher way back in the day.
Oh yeah.
But, notebook paper. And you would take out the sheet of notebook paper and there was a margin, right? And so we always had to start writing within it. Well, remember what we used the margin for? Margin was for dreaming and for doodling. And, for me, it was the guy's last name. Don't tell John, but, the guy's last name that I thought would save me from Wolbecker being W down in the alphabet. And that's what the margin was. The margin let us rest. The margin let us dream. That's where the rest came. And what happens in adulthood is that we show everybody the middle of the paper. We show them the resume. We show them what we've done. We want them to be so proud of us. And so we show them the middle. But for all of us in adulthood, what does it look like to still have that margin of the notebook paper? What are those moments for us in which we really come up for air that are just for us, that we're not performing, we're not proving, we're not pushing anything forward, but we are actually resting. And that could mean physical rest of our bodies and our caffeine intake. And what do our nighttime rhythms look like? And in different seasons, how early are we waking up? And what does rest actually look like? And rest can also be these active parts of just restoring our life and restoring our spirit and restoring our soul, these kid like pieces of us that almost were the margin of what did we dream about doing when the bell rang and we would run out? Well, what was that? And so, as we all continue on in adulthood and we show everybody the middle of our page, if we're not careful, we push out that margin and we push out that rest. But that's actually where we are restored. We are
Mm,
meant to work from a place of rest. We're not meant to rest from a place of work. And that's really countercultural.
mm.
You're not going to find many people holding that true for yourself, except for yourself and maybe your spouse or your roommate. You're not going to have people who are fighting to make sure that your body and heart and mind are restored. And so, whatever that looks like, whatever that amount of time, whether it's 1 day a week or whatever that margin looks like, some people will say, hey, I don't go until 12 o'clock on Monday morning. And just that time until 12 o'clock in the morning, I go for walks or I just, I do a hobby that I love to do or something that helps them feel restored. And so, it can be in all different realms. And I think for people who are really active, the idea of rest sounds so inefficient that it just sounds like that is not going to work for me. And so be creative with it. There's no rules around this. There's no parameters around this. I would just say, what is that margin of the notebook
Mm.
paper that you almost forget about all the responsibilities? And before you know it, you come back and you feel the sense of my mind has had a break.
Mm.
My physical body has had a break. My to-do list at work has had a break. And from it, we then refill and have energy to move forward. And again, how do we work from a place of rest and allow ourselves to do that over rest really from a place of work and burnout and tiredness?
That's really cool. I know I'm never going to look at notebook paper ever the same after hearing that. I feel like for a lot of us, our sheets of notebook paper have really small margins at
Yeah.
this point. It's like the paper you had to write in college and it was limited to 5 pages, but you had more to say. I don't know who
Yes.
that is. It was definitely me a couple times, but you had to shrink the margin to fit all the words. when you really should have just left some stuff out. So,
Yeah, that's so
uh,
good. And I will say with this, like, all of us are swimming in grace. Like, all of
mm,
us are swimming in not a formula. And I think when we get really caught up of what we're not doing well, it freaks us out even more. And then, like you said, the font gets even smaller and we try to cram more in. And there's another thing I'm not doing well. So I'm not doing rest well. And now I'm stressed about rest. And I'm just going to go back. And so allowing really that ability to try and be like, "Oh, well, I feel terrible after I did that. I don't feel rest." Okay, throw it out. Try again. Like every season changes. Maybe you do shift careers and your work schedule changes. Maybe, you have a newborn and that shifts life. Maybe, your spouse works overnight now and that shifts. There is so much permission to rest and there's so much personalization to rest too. And so
mhm,
allow yourself to explore. This is really a one size fits one. And sometimes, again, allowing ourselves to have that permission, we know pretty quickly, hey, if I had a half a day off or if I had one day off, I know exactly what I would do. And
mm,
then just allow yourself to try some new rhythms with that.
that's awesome. Yeah. I think of around here at the office, the company that I run, we talk about we don't talk about being efficient all that often,
Yeah.
but we talk about being effective.
Wow.
And I feel like that's what rest is. It's not efficient whatsoever from a time standpoint. It is effective though, because when you've rested well and you've learned how to dream, you've learned how to give your mind a break, you've learned how to be instead of do,
Yes.
you can then operate in the best sense of work when you go back to that work and that movement. It's not efficient. It's
Yeah.
effective. Hey, what was that book that you referenced? The Prepare, Perform,
Yes.
and
Span of
Prevail.
Control by Carrie Lorenz. Yeah. Span of Control.
She was the one we saw at the
Yes.
GLS
She
last
was.
week.
The GLS is what you and I were at for the
Okay.
Global Leadership Summit, the actual conference event.
Yep.
Yes.
That was so cool to see you there. I know I've gotten to go live the last couple years to the GLS, and you've been like shadowing people there, like the speakers the last couple years. What are you doing there? What is that all about?
How did they let somebody like me in? I don't know.
No,
I love it.
that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying it's amazing. You're probably going to be on that stage at some point speaking. But how's that experience been? Like backstage with the speakers and stuff.
Yeah, this is really cool. I appreciate you asking me this. So, one piece that how I've learned when I need to shift vocationally is I often ask myself, what am I enjoying and is there
Mm,
anything missing? And what was missing for me was actually the behind the scenes of how does a speaker actually perfect their craft?
mm,
How does a writer actually write content? So, somebody like me who coaches and speaks and eventually would love to write, I began to become really curious about the behind the scenes work. And so, for those of us who lead, often we can be in front, we're comfortable with that, but we know there are these parts to our own development at which we're missing growing. And for me was really the behind the scenes work of what does it take to do this as a speaker and a coach. And so with that, I had an opportunity, I still have an opportunity. I work with the GLN to do some of their speaker research and to just kind of understand the behind the scenes of who some of the speakers are and how they've perfected their craft and what are they about. And it's been tremendously rewarding personally for me. And then one of the really fun parts is during the GLS, I get to usually host one of the phenomenal speakers. And I tell you, there is something about seeing people actually human,
mm,
that these people who have tremendous legacy and tremendous life and
yeah.
content and maybe even are, they're in these spots where you can only dream and imagine and you're wondering, but then to see them really human in the hallway and going through their notes before they get on stage and getting nervous. And what do all these pieces look like and how they then are generous with connection with other
Mm,
speakers that
mm,
perhaps they haven't met. And so it has been just a tremendous gift to me, not only on what I needed to grow in and learn on a lot of the behind the scenes of my business and what I do, but also when you meet people and they're normal and they're real and you still don't see a bridge between what they're doing and what you're doing, with
yeah.
how amazing they are and how many
Yeah.
steps ahead. But again, that really covered in grace for all
Mm.
of us, that we are all pursuing great purpose and energy and joy. And when you see people live that out, but in a really human way, that is what usually sticks with me the most from getting to do that during the conference.
That's cool. For those of you listening or watching, we're talking about the GLS, the Global Leadership Summit. It's one of the world's largest leadership conferences. It happens around August each year in the States, and then it's broadcast around the world. Jackie, you probably know more stats and stuff like that around it. Um,
Yeah, 80,000 people usually are live that are, in the different locations. And then it's, yeah, hundreds of thousands international. Then after those 2 days goes out to many different countries.
Yeah. So a really impactful event. If you are leading a team, leading a business, we had a lot of our team there, and it's just incredible experience. It's 2 days. So check it out sometime. We'll throw it in the show notes as well as Carrie's book that you mentioned. Jackie, this year you were with Joni Eareckson Tada, amazing, phenomenal woman, inspirational, incredible speaker. I'm curious, give me like a behind the scenes of one of your conversations, or was there a word of encouragement she spoke over you? Because I'm sure she probably did.
Mhm.
Anything come to mind?
Yeah, it's hard to be around her and not experience a massive level of encouragement.
Mm,
Yeah, she has a beautiful team of people around her who
mm,
really take care of her. And seeing the absolute challenge to move in a day and to move from location to location, let alone give a brilliant keynote speech
mm.
to 80,000 people live, right? The complexity of that for any of us is mind boggling, let alone her physical challenge. She took a
She
diving
could,
accident at 17
yeah.
and was a paraplegic and cannot move from her neck down. And so, even, the little things where somebody always had to bring her a bottle of water. She was in the podcast studio and somebody had to come and wipe her nose. Like these really things that you just don't even think about in the
Mm,
daily challenge. And the weekend after the summit, I was preaching and I asked her, I said, "Tell me what it's like to experience peace.
mm.
Like, how do you experience peace and how do you continue to feel energy and joy?" Because I was like, I have to find out what happened. And she just looks at me and she says, "Well, this morning was a terrible morning.
Mm,
And I had a lot of trouble this morning. And usually in the mornings, my care team comes around me and they bring me coffee." And she said, "I told them I cannot even start the morning yet.
mm,
Do not bring me coffee. Do not start the process of starting to get me ready." And she looked at me. So she said, it's been a really terrible morning. And she said, "What I told my team to do was I said, surround the bed and we're just going to start singing and we're just going to start worshiping." And she said, the room just filled with song and the room filled with worship. And only in Johnny could do, she goes, "And you'll never believe what happened." And she went on to say that she then experienced energy and she experienced encouragement and she knew that she could do the best that she could do and they could start this process. And she was filled again. And she was said, we are hardwired for dependency and allowing ourselves to be dependent. And in that moment, not only is she physically dependent on so many people, but
Yeah.
day by day to be refilled for the journey ahead. And she said, that's only when the peace comes. That's only when the sweetness comes. That's only when the energy and the joy comes. And it was, we did all the behind the scenes thing. And she was so gracious with all the interviews and greeting people and meeting them. And then she goes out to deliver the keynote. And all the while, Tim, I'm like holding the story of what her morning really was like.
Mm,
And she said, most people think that I don't feel anything from the shoulders down, but I am in constant chronic nerve pain.
mm,
Every minute,
mm.
I am in constant chronic nerve pain.
Wow.
And it just baffled me to think on a daily basis, we know how hard life is to actually pull off
Mm,
for all that's ahead of us and all that we have. And to think of how she does it with so many obstacles and so many people who have chronic illness and are not experiencing seasons of energy and joy and purpose. Man, the testimony of her life and her story, I learned way more behind the scenes from walking with her than I
Mm,
ever anticipated of what a life of peace and purpose. And, you'll say, I know you say in your podcast, like, how do we move people 1% more towards
mm,
that? How do
mm,
we move them towards purpose and what they're called to do? And when you see somebody with limitations, but the limitations actually turn into purpose
mm,
and a message and to refine that energy each day. Yeah, I take that with me most days of
mm.
when I wake up and know what I have ahead of me.
That's incredible. Thanks for sharing that. I want to like pause, not actually pause, but I'm just thinking about the person who's driving right
Yeah.
now, or maybe running on the treadmill or mowing the lawn. And you're thinking about, like, I'm not ready for the morning or the
Mm,
day to
mm,
begin.
mhm.
And to take a second to refocus, to maybe call out for some help like Johnny did. We are in a world of that's radically independent and pushes us to be radically independent, and go back to what you rely on, whether it's your values, whether it's your faith in God like Johnny, whether it's things that you know are true, and just take a second and maybe ask for some help right now to say, hey, I'm not ready for the morning to get started. Could we talk? Or maybe you need to take some time or meditate or pray. And that might be the moment you need right now. So I just wanted to pause and create some space for that in case that's a need, because that might be right now. And maybe it's not right now. Maybe it's tomorrow or the next day. We're all going to have one of those days. So that's a really cool story. So thanks for sharing that. Hey there. If this episode impacted you, would you share it with a friend right now? That would mean a lot to me. And even better, if you could leave a review of the show. Maybe mention what part of this conversation stuck with you. On the first Tuesday of each month, we're going to bring you some more stories of great leaders who have learned what it means to be truly wealthy. If you're watching on YouTube, we're going to drop that on the first Thursday of each month. So keep an eye on that. Thanks so much. We'll see you next time.